Why cucumbers love certain neighbors. The science behind companion planting. Hey there, Earthly Delights family, welcome back. Or if you're new here, I'm so glad you've joined us. If you've ever stood over your cucumber plants, scratching your head and wondering why they look a little sad, even though you've given them sunlight, water, and all your care, then this video is just for you. Because what if I told you, it might not be you at all? What if the real problem was your cucumbers silently struggling with their neighbors? Yep. Even in your peaceful backyard or tidy patio planter, a quiet drama might be unfolding underground. You see, whether you're working with raised beds, window boxes, or that one treasured container on your balcony, if you love growing things but hate seeing your hard work wilt or fail, you're not alone. Our viewers are thoughtful, curious, and hands-on. You care deeply about nature. You crave practical tips that work in real spaces. And you believe gardening should be joyful, not just technical. So today, we're diving deep into the secret world of plant friendships and feuds. Starting with cucumbers, what they love, what they loathe, and how choosing the right companions can change your harvest entirely. And hey, if that sounds like the kind of garden wisdom you want more of, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's blooming next. Shall we dig in? Root messages. The secret chemistry of plants. Now, let's slip beneath the surface, not just of the garden, but of what we think we know about plants. Because cucumbers, like many of us, are more sensitive than they let on. You might be surprised to learn that roots don't just anchor plants and suck up water. They're storytellers, quiet chemists, constantly sending out little molecular messages to everything around them. And here's where it gets fascinating. Cucumbers read those messages loud and clear. This underground conversation is called allelopathy. It's a bit like living in an apartment building where your neighbors either bake cookies that drift through the walls and warm your heart, or blast music at 3 a.m. and clog the plumbing. Some plants, like friendly beans, leave behind signals that make cucumbers feel safe and supported. Others, well, let's just say cucumbers start to wither around them like introverts at a rowdy party. If you've ever had a cucumber plant look healthy one week and turn pale or stunted the next, it might not be a disease or the weather. It could be the subtle sabotage of a bad companion. Imagine pouring all your love into that planter, only to have a nearby root network hoard all the nutrients or flood the soil with unfriendly vibes. And this isn't just theory. Gardeners across balconies, patios, and backyards have witnessed it firsthand. It's why one set of cucumbers flourishes while another, just a few feet away, mysteriously struggles. The invisible communication below the soil could be the key. But don't worry, now that we're aware of this secret language, we're going to learn how to listen. In the next section, I'll show you who the real troublemakers are when it comes to cucumber companionship, and how to spot them before they spoil your season. Stick with me. The roots have only just begun to speak. To the bad roommates. Who's draining your cucumbers? Now that we understand cucumbers are quietly reading the room, or rather, the soil, it's time to talk about the company they keep. Because just like people, cucumbers don't thrive in every crowd. Let's talk about the underground bullies. And at the top of that list? Potatoes. Now, don't get me wrong, potatoes are a garden staple, and we love them for it. But when planted near cucumbers, they act like heavy-handed roommates who take more than their share of space, food, and peace. Both potatoes and cucumbers have wide-spreading root systems, and both are hungry for the same nutrients, especially nitrogen. But potatoes don't just compete, they play dirty. They release subtle allelopathic chemicals, a sort of territorial marker, that can actually inhibit cucumber growth. It's like they're whispering to your cucumbers, "This space is mine," and your poor cukes start to believe it. The result? You may notice yellowing leaves, drooping vines, fewer blossoms, and if you're growing in a container or a crowded raised bed, the effects can be even more pronounced, faster, harsher, and more frustrating. And potatoes aren't the only offenders. Melons, squash, and pumpkins, yes, even those juicy garden cousins, pose another problem entirely. They're not chemically aggressive, but they're greedy in a different way. These plants all belong to the cucurbit family, and they want exactly what your cucumbers want: sun, water, and nutrients. Plus, they sprawl like nobody's business. It's like hosting 5 guests at a table made for 2. Everyone ends up fighting for elbow room. And no one gets to enjoy the meal. And the stress that comes from that overcrowding? It doesn't just stunt growth, it invites pests. 2. Weakened plants become prime targets for beetles, mildew, and disease. This is especially important for small space gardeners, those of you working on balconies, in patio beds, or tight urban plots. When you have limited soil real estate, even one bad neighbor can take down your whole block. But here's the good news. Once you know who the bad roommates are, you can start making space for better ones. And that's exactly where we're headed next, into the world of cucumber allies. The givers, the helpers, the companions that don't compete, but contribute. Trust me, your cucumbers are about to meet their new best friends. 3. The green allies. Who has your cucumbers back? Now that we've politely asked the bad roommates to pack their bags, let's talk about the good neighbors, the ones who bring over soup when your cucumbers are having a rough week. Because just as some plants drain energy, others give it back in quiet, powerful ways. Let me introduce you to one of the greatest allies your cucumbers could ever ask for: beans. Yep, humble little beans and their cousins, peas, are like the quiet geniuses of the garden. They don't just grow, they give. As members of the legume family, they have this amazing superpower called nitrogen fixation. While most plants take nitrogen from the soil, legumes actually pull it from the air and convert it into a form other plants can use. It's like they're turning invisible gold into fertilizer and then generously sharing it. And cucumbers? They soak it up like a sponge. You'll often see stronger vines, greener leaves, and more blossoms when cucumbers are grown near bush beans or peas. It's a beautiful, quiet collaboration, no competition, just cooperation. And there's more. Corn, for example, might seem like an unlikely ally, but in the right setting, it's a sturdy friend. In larger garden spaces, corn can offer shade to cucumber vines that don't love blazing midday sun, and the stalks can even double as a natural trellis. That's nature's version of a 2-for-1 special. But here's where it gets especially exciting for small space gardeners, those of you growing in containers, balconies, or cozy side yards. You don't need a big plot to build a dream team. Think about dwarf basil, oregano, or nasturtiums. These compact powerhouses fit neatly alongside cucumbers and bring big benefits. Basil can help ward off insects. Oregano creates a dense living mulch. And nasturtiums are as beautiful as they are helpful, and we'll get into exactly how in the next part. This is your garden's starting lineup, a mix of supporters, fixers, and defenders, all working silently behind the scenes to make your cucumbers shine. And the best part? Most of these companions aren't just helpful, they're edible, fragrant, and a joy to grow in their own right. But like any good community, it's not just about internal harmony, it's also about defense. In the next section, we're going to meet the garden bodyguards, the ones who keep pests confused, distracted, or running in the opposite direction. Because when it comes to gardening, prevention isn't just better than cure, it's half the harvest. Stay with me. 4. Natural pest control. Building a defensive garden. So far, we've talked about who helps cucumbers grow and who holds them back. But what about those tiny, uninvited guests who show up just when everything's going well? You know the ones: aphids, beetles, nematodes, the kind of pests that seem to know exactly when your garden is at its most vulnerable. But here's the good news. You don't need sprays or harsh chemicals to keep them away. You just need the right allies in the right places, because some plants are nature's own bodyguards. Let's start with marigolds. These aren't just pretty flowers for garden borders, they're underground warriors. Marigolds release a powerful compound called alpha-terthionyl through their roots. And it's basically kryptonite for nematodes, those tiny, destructive worms that gnaw at cucumber roots. When you plant marigolds near your cukes, you're creating an invisible perimeter, a natural pest shield. And above ground, let's talk about nasturtiums. These bright, peppery flavored flowers are like decoys in a garden battlefield. Aphids can't resist them, and that's exactly the point. Instead of infesting your cucumber vines, they rush to the nasturtiums, giving your cucumbers space to thrive. It's a strategy called trap cropping, and it works wonders, especially in small gardens where every inch matters. But we're not done yet. Some of the most powerful protectors are the ones you already grow in your kitchen, herbs like dill, oregano, thyme, and basil. They're strong. Aromatic oils create a scent barrier that confuses common pests like cucumber beetles and whiteflies. To bugs, your garden starts to smell like a crowded spice market, and they can't find their target. Imagine being a tiny beetle, flying in to find dinner, only to get hit with a wall of basil and thyme. You'd turn around too. And here's where this gets really useful for indoor gardeners or those growing on balconies. Herbs thrive in containers. That means you can create a mobile pest control zone, shifting pots around, layering scent combinations, and giving your cucumbers exactly the kind of defense they need without using a drop of pesticide. Even better, the more diverse your garden, the fewer pest problems you'll have. That's not just theory, it's supported by countless studies. Nature loves variety. When you surround cucumbers with a mix of flowers, herbs, and helpful companions, you create a garden that's balanced, resilient, and much harder for pests to conquer. And now, we've set the stage for one of the most magical and most overlooked parts of growing cucumbers: pollination. Because even if you do everything else right, without the right kind of visitors, your harvest could still fall flat. But don't worry, in the next part, I'll show you how to turn your garden into a pollinator paradise. Let's bring the buzz back. 5 buzzing benefits. Pollinators and fruit power. Now that your cucumbers have defenders standing guard and generous neighbors lending support, there's one more piece of the puzzle, and it's a big one. Because all the nutrients, protection, and perfect soil in the world won't mean a thing if the flowers don't get what they need to bear fruit. And that's where pollinators step in, the silent partners in your garden's success. You see, cucumbers are a little unique. They produce both male and female flowers. And for fruit to form, pollen has to move from one to the other. It's a delicate dance, and it doesn't happen on its own. Bees, butterflies, and other pollinators are the matchmakers here. Without them, your cucumber plants might bloom beautifully, but the fruits stay small, misshapen, or simply never arrive. But here's the beautiful part: attracting pollinators isn't hard. In fact, it's one of the most joyful parts of gardening. You just need to invite them properly. Let's start with one of their absolute favorites, borage. With its striking star-shaped blue flowers, it's a magnet for bees. They can't resist it, and when borage is planted near cucumbers, not only does pollination improve, but some gardeners even swear it enhances cucumber flavor. Now that's a double win. Then there's calendula, zinnias, and of course, sunflowers. These aren't just garden candy, they're navigational beacons. Sunflowers, in particular, rise like golden towers above your garden, catching the attention of every flying visitor within a mile. They guide bees right to your cucumbers, helping the cycle continue. And for those growing in small urban spaces, you haven't been left out. Pollinators will still come, if you give them a reason to. Use window boxes, hanging baskets, or even vertical trellises to layer in blooms. A burst of color at eye level or just above your cucumber vines can make all the difference. The goal is to create a little pollinator party, a reason for bees and butterflies to linger. And when they do, they'll stop by your cucumber flowers on the way, doing the work you never see but always benefit from. What's more, this creates a feedback loop. More pollinators mean better pollination. Better pollination leads to more flowers. More flowers attract more pollinators. It's a cycle of abundance, all triggered by your choice to plant a few extra blooms. So the next time you see a bee hovering near your cucumbers, don't swat it away. Smile, you just caught your garden in the act of blooming brilliance. But of course, flowers and friends alone aren't enough. The way you arrange your garden, who sits where, who supports whom, can make or break your results. And that's exactly what we're getting into next. The ultimate garden layout for cucumber success. Let's design your very own cucumber village, and it starts with connection. 6. Designing your cucumber village. So, we've met the friends, spotted the foes, and learned the rhythms of defense and pollination. Now comes the part where everything comes together, like planning a neighborhood where every plant has a role, and every square inch serves a purpose. Welcome to what I like to call your cucumber village. Think of your garden, no matter how big or small, as a living community. In a successful village, everyone contributes, no one crowds the sidewalks, and every house is placed with care. Let's start with layout. In a backyard or raised bed, imagine placing your beans and peas toward the north side. That's where they can share their nitrogen-fixing magic without casting too much shade. Now, wrap the outer border with marigolds and basil. Why? Because they form your village fence, keeping out pests and adding a soft aromatic edge that cucumbers quietly love. In the center, let your cucumber vines sprawl or climb, depending on your space. If you're growing vertically, use a sturdy trellis and plant dill or thyme just underneath. They'll act like guards at the gate, masking scents and deterring beetles before they reach the vines. And in any sunny pocket you can spare, tuck in some pollinator flowers, sunflowers, borage, calendula. These aren't just pretty residents. They're the entertainers, drawing in bees like performers at a weekend fair. When the pollinators show up for the flowers, your cucumbers quietly reap the reward. Now, if you're in a more compact space, say, a balcony garden or just a few large containers, you can still build your village. Use tiered planters or multi-level shelves to mimic a layered ecosystem. Let the cucumbers climb upward, herbs fill in the base, and companion flowers spill over the sides like window boxes in full bloom. One tip for container gardens: rotate. Move your pots slightly every few days to ensure even light and airflow. That keeps all your plants balanced and reduces the risk of mildew and pests building up in stagnant corners. And don't forget water. Cucumbers need it consistently, but not every companion does. That's why grouping plants with similar moisture needs is key. Keep your water-loving friends together, cucumbers, beans, and marigolds, and place dry soil lovers like rosemary and sage far, far away. With the right plan, your cucumber village becomes more than a garden. It becomes a rhythm, a living system where every root, leaf, and bloom is playing a part in something bigger. But just as you know who to invite in, it's just as important to know who to leave out. In the next section, we're going to talk about the troublemakers. The ones that look innocent enough but can quietly unravel everything you've built. Trust me, you'll want to keep them off the guest list. Let's take a look. 7 The troublemakers to avoid. Now that your cucumber village is thriving, with nitrogen-sharing beans, pest-repelling herbs, and pollinator-attracting flowers, it might feel like you've got everything under control. But before we call it a day, there's one more truth every gardener needs to hear. Not every plant belongs in your cucumber's circle. Some plants, as charming as they may seem, come with baggage. They might look harmless. They might even grow beautifully on their own. But when placed near cucumbers, they stir up trouble, quietly competing, crowding, or releasing chemicals that can sabotage your entire setup. Let's start with one of the biggest culprits: fennel. Fennel is bold, fragrant, and gorgeous in the right spot, but it's a loner. It releases powerful allelopathic compounds that inhibit the growth of many plants around it, including cucumbers. If you've ever placed fennel nearby and wondered why everything else seems a little off, now you know. Then we've got the cucurbit cousins: melons, squash, and pumpkins. Yes, they're from the same family tree as cucumbers. But like siblings too close in age, they can't share space peacefully. They compete for the exact same resources: water, nutrients, light, and they sprawl wildly. In a cramped space, they choke each other out and attract all the same pests, multiplying your garden's vulnerability. And don't overlook sage and rosemary. These herbs prefer dry soil and sunny, well-drained locations. Cucumbers, on the other hand, love moisture and a bit of shade. When you plant them side by side, neither one really wins. It's a quiet mismatch, the kind you might not notice right away. But over time, both plants will underperform. Even potatoes, as we mentioned earlier, are heavy feeders that send out chemical warnings underground. They demand a lot, and they don't like to share. Stick them in a corner far away from your cukes, they'll be happier. And so will your harvest. Remember, gardening isn't just about planting what you love. It's about understanding relationships, the invisible, intricate web of chemistry, competition, and cooperation. So before you fill every open space with a new seedling, pause and ask, will this new neighbor bring harmony or havoc? In our final chapter, we're going to pull all of this together. You'll learn how companion planting is more than just folklore. It's a science-backed strategy that turns your garden into a thriving, self-sustaining ecosystem. Ready to close the loop? Let's finish strong. 8. Your personal garden lab. Observe, test, tune. By now, your garden probably feels less like a jumble of pots and beds, and more like a living, breathing system, full of relationships, rhythms, and quiet intelligence. But here's something every plant lover eventually learns, even with all the right information. No two gardens are exactly the same. That's because your space, whether it's a windowsill, a raised bed, a rooftop planter, or a full backyard, is its own little ecosystem. And the most powerful thing you can do as a gardener? Become a curious observer. Think of your garden as a personal lab, a place to test, adjust, and learn. Maybe your cucumbers love growing with basil but struggle with oregano. Maybe marigolds work wonders in spring but fade too fast in summer heat. These small discoveries, when you track them, become gold. And over time, you'll notice patterns. You'll know that in your space, in your light, with your soil, certain combinations just sing. So start taking notes. Literally, keep a garden journal or snap weekly photos. Record what worked, what didn't, and what you'll try differently next season. Maybe your beans bloomed early. Maybe your dill bolted in the heat. These aren't failures, they're feedback. And the more you pay attention, the more tuned in you'll become. In today's digital age, you can even use garden tracking apps to log sun patterns, watering schedules, and plant pairings. And if you love visuals, consider printing photo timelines. Watching your cucumber bed evolve from seedlings to harvest is more than satisfying, it's empowering. This is the shift, from gardening by guesswork to gardening by relationship. You're not just planting seeds anymore. You're building partnerships. You're creating a garden that speaks to you, and more importantly, one that you've learned to understand in return. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by the idea of tracking and adjusting, don't worry. Nature has an incredible way of forgiving mistakes. What matters most is that you notice, that you keep showing up, that you stay curious. Because a garden doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. It just needs to be alive. And yours already is. Now, let's bring everything full circle. In our final chapter, we'll tie together every root, every bloom, every lesson, and see just how deeply companion planting can transform not just. No plant grows alone. And so, here we are, standing at the edge of the garden we've just built together. Not with bricks and mortar, but with understanding, with stories, with a fresh perspective on how cucumbers, and really, all plants, thrive when they're surrounded by the right community. You see, companion planting isn't some old gardener's superstition. It's grounded in real science, in allelopathy, biology, chemistry, and ecology. It's a system where every living thing, from the tiniest herb to the tallest sunflower, plays a role. It's the quiet reminder that no plant, not even the simplest cucumber, grows alone. We've uncovered how some neighbors boost growth through shared nutrients, how others protect against pests with scent and structure, and how pollinators become the bridge between flower and fruit. We've explored how to design with intention, tune our gardens through observation, and avoid the silent saboteurs that hold everything back. And maybe most importantly, we've reconnected with the idea that gardening isn't just about results. It's about relationships, between plants, yes, but also between you and your space, between your hands and the soil, between your attention and the life that answers it. Whether you're working in a backyard brimming with rows of green, or a city balcony where every pot counts, you now hold something powerful: clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't just improve your harvest, but deepens your connection to the earthly delights around you. So as you plant your next cucumber, pause for a moment, look at the companions you choose, feel the soil, notice the scent, and know that with every thoughtful choice, you're doing more than growing food, you're creating harmony. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video helped you see your garden in a new light, give it a thumbs up, share it with a fellow grower, and don't forget to subscribe to Earthly Delights for more stories, science, and soulful tips from the garden path. Until next time, stay rooted, stay curious, and keep growing.